I'm here with Brandon of SWF Industrial.
Yes.
And we're here in your facility. It's a beautiful morning. We got the sun coming in here and we got work going on behind us. First, I would just like to thank you for stepping up to the line. Thank you for joining me today. You know, we met, I don't know, like about a month ago, maybe?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And you just were one of those people that everybody that I was talking with is like, you need to meet this guy. You need to meet this guy. You need to talk with this guy. And then I discovered that you have your own podcast. And I discovered you have your own YouTube, you know, you're a gamer. And it's like, so even in the prep beforehand, this is weird. We're gonna see, sorry, I needed to find my camera. We're gonna see whose podcast this really is. So yeah. So just thank you for being here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me. One, I just want to say what you're doing is not easy because I did just start something similar. It is very difficult to sit in your side of the seat. Mm-hmm. The other thing is your guests. I have taken so many gems from the people you've had on, stuff that I've literally turned around and implemented on our own website because it was just too good to let fly by. So
wow.
One, thanks for everybody who's been on so far. And then you're having your mission about what your podcast is about. I don't think I realized how important that was until I started listening to you guys. Wow. And I really tried to force that upon myself and find it for my own because, other than that, you're just talking to people if you don't have something to go towards, a goal or whatever that looks like. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Wow. I did not expect to be encouraged right in the beginning of the podcast. I appreciate that. Our vision and our mission is something that is deeply important to us. It probably started out of a less noble pursuit than, it probably started out of realizing, well, there's not enough people. And then it was like, well, why? Why is there not enough people? Why do people feel like they have less value if they do this versus this? And I mean, what you do does not define your value.
Fair.
But depending on the light that's being shined on it and the way that it's being communicated, it can really make you feel like something doesn't have value that really does. I can remember a few months ago talking with a guy, and I probably said this on another podcast, but I repeat myself and I ramble. We established that in the beginning. But he talked about he was doing a project, and he's like, well, how does this have any value? These guys are doing this type of work over here. And it was within the same company. And, he was doing electrical work, and he's like, this project that I'm doing, this is like a nothing. And it's like, well, actually everything is interwoven and everything is connected. And so it's like, I talk about this a lot. No one builds buildings alone.
Agreed.
And so even the stuff that's going on in the background right now, that's all about a project that's being done where there's probably, not probably, I know the answer to this. There's no project that you work alone on, whether there are other trades or whatever. And even if you're a company that is so vast and so big that you have everything in your organization, that's still a team of tradespeople.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I used to build schedules a lot for power plant construction. And you want to talk about dependencies, right? Or connections or relationships between activities, trades, you name it. I mean, they're all inside this giant piece of paper that puts this giant project together that is tens of thousands of hours, and it takes all of these different people. And I don't think people realize the vastness to just keep our general life going.
Yeah.
And all that goes into simple things that we take for granted.
Well, I do the same thing. We were talking when I was back in the truck in here this morning, and I talked with you about, wow, I wish we weren't real and authentic on this podcast, because I now have to, I started, you asked me, when should you bail on something and when should you keep going? I should bail right now. I really should. But I started down this road. We were backing up the truck, and I commented to you about how, I used to be able to just back up to a trailer using all mirrors, and now my truck has more cameras than I ever thought a vehicle could have. And it all but backs it up for me.
Sure.
And I was at the shop the other day, and I hopped in the flatbed, which has no frills at all. And I couldn't back up. And so my point being, I took those skills for granted, and I stopped using them. And so then I lost them. And what you're talking about there in society, I think if we don't know about something, I often deal with this with, on the design side of our organization at Blackline with clients who've never built a building before. And they don't understand, especially, I was on at a project meeting the other day, and since I've been a part of different trades over the years, I know a little bit, and you forget, just like the truck camera, but I know a little bit of what it takes to do some of the work.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't know any of that. And so when an electrician or a plumber or an HVAC tech or even a steel guy, they just see it happen.
Yep.
And they don't know what it takes to make that happen. And when you talk about the schedule, I actually, this is not how we normally start, but this is great because it's something that I think a lot of people don't understand the importance of coordinating a schedule together, because all of the pieces, it's like, if you just threw people into a schedule or didn't have one and people just showed up, it takes 10 times as long to do a job.
And a lot more money.
That is true. That is true. So, I mean, can you just share with us some of your wisdom from that experience? I mean, because you, in your origins, you'd worked for a company in New York, right?
Oh, they were based out of Philadelphia is the main,
Okay.
and they owned a company in Lancaster, and it was pretty much just power plant construction. So
Okay.
nuclear, fossil, traveled all over just doing either outage-based stuff or project-based stuff. And when I say doing, like, I was an office junkie. I didn't do really anything. I was pushing papers around. So really for me, it was like cost projections and cost analysis, and then scheduling the actual work as best I could. But you would take, in a moment in the middle of nowhere, there'd be 10,000 people all going into this one small or big power plant into this small town. And 30 days later, we'd be doing a bunch of work, and then we would head out on our way. But yeah, major construction on either fossil or nuclear power plants.
Wow. So you talk about all those people and all of those trades. Talk a little bit about what it is to build a schedule. Because I actually think that that's something that, some of our listeners, and I'm not sure who's listening,
Sure.
you are the first person to ever sit down with me that's like, I've listened to most of them and I'm like, wow, holy crap. So
Come on.
yeah, I mean, that's awesome. But some of our listeners that might be listening to this, I remember when I started my first company, I didn't even know what a schedule of values was. And the first job that I got, it was actually a government job, and it was for a local university, and they literally didn't make me feel like shit. They just sat me down and were like, "This is how it works."
Yep.
Go figure, university.
Yeah.
They were teaching, but talk a little bit about what it is to build a schedule, because I don't know that many people that would have had that experience that you have there.
Yeah. So I didn't have any experience walking into it. I didn't go to school to be in project management. Kind of fell into it through my father worked for PPL for a long time.
Yeah.
And then
Great utility, by the way.
yeah, lots of people, follow in their father's footsteps. And so went into my first project and did a lot of cost analysis and things like that. And then got into scheduling and really that was like the building things for me, but it was like computer based. And it's just taking a giant estimate and realizing that you have to break it into chunks that are quantifiable over time, and they're digestible to people who may not care about it. And then it has to be trackable so you can make sure you're on time or not. And then just putting them all together. The hardest part is all the relationships, because you have to get multiple trades, multiple foremen, superintendents together to understand how they have to work together, and they each kind of feed or depend on each other. And then getting that all lined out, stamping it or baselining it, and then you just track every single 24 hours against what your plan was, and are you ahead or behind? That's really the game.
Is that something that you just do yourself, or do you coordinate and communicate with those other trades?
Yeah, so I don't know how to do any of the work, right? So I'm just this idiot sitting at a computer that is just trying to take these line items that say words that I don't completely understand and putting them in a sequence that makes sense. And a lot of the time I'm sitting with individual people who know everything about the work, and they say, well, oh, you can't do this that way, or you can't do that way, or you got to wait on this. Whether you're rigging a boiler panel in, or you're working in a nuclear outage, like all of that stuff, I was completely dependent on people who knew what they were doing. So I think I learned a lot of team building skills that way, and how to be super humble in a situation where I knew absolutely nothing. Because it was fascinating learning how quickly I was able to pick up on nuances of what work came before which. Obviously, scaffolds went up to get to an elevation so that you could reach the welds or whatever that needed to look like. So it was just asking a ton of questions and asking them hopefully the right way so that I could get what I needed across to get the information back to me.
Wow. So that was your part of your origin, your first step maybe into the trades and the construction?
Yeah, I did that for about 8 years. Traveled as much as I possibly could. And I know at the beginning we said talk with authority and like you know what you're talking about. So I would say in that phase, I just never said no. I tried to I became kind of a little bit of the firefighter where I always went and took the difficult jobs because I usually learned the most. They were some of them were horrible, not in experience, but just in general, very stressful, long hours, things like that. But I think it garnered me for tough times ahead and not being upset with those kind of things. So I did that for 8 straight years. I got into management at my previous employer for 2 years until I came over here.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that. And with that origin, tell us a little bit about SWF.
Yeah. So Stewart Welding Fabricating is actually the full bread name. So Al Stewart started the company in '84. And then one car garage, one employee. And then he bought his first building, which we still own, I believe in '85, '86. He had a couple buildings before that, but I think that was the first real big like fabrication shop that he moved into. And then they got that old building up to 80 employees, built this in 2010. And now I think he peaked at 144 people, I think. And that was really that was how he measured success always. He always talked about how many people were working here.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really cool. Every time we would talk about business, which wasn't very often, that was really, how he measured, like I said, the success of how we were doing at that point in time. And then I forget when it was when they kind of shortened to the SWF specifically. I don't remember off the top of my head, but he did that, bought this in 2010, built this, and then we just kind of keep chipping away and growing from there.
Wow. So you came into the business when?
June 2018.
Okay.
And it was mostly around Al's health at that time. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. Sorry, I'm not looking at you. I'm thinking as I'm
that's fine.
looking away.
You should look at the camera anyway.
Okay, understood.
Most of our guests appreciate that they don't have to look at me.
Understood. Alzheimer's dementia, I don't know how long at that point in time, but enough that he knew, he wasn't able to remember and wrap his arms around as much as he could.
Yeah.
And was starting to get worried, with succession planning and things like that. So we had a family meeting. We kind of were all sitting there trying to figure out what was going on. And then we talked about next step. It was posed to me whether I'd ever be interested in coming over and working here. At that point in time, I absolutely loved my career. I loved what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was just new into management. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to lead people, manage people, whatever you want to call it. And it took about a month to make the decision, talk to a lot of people that I take advice from, terrified, and then finally made the decision to come over here in June and then started at the end of June.
Wow. So you've been here now 7 years?
Almost 6.
Almost 6 years. Okay. And when we first started talking, you referenced how important titles are to you. That's a lie. But you're the CEO, correct?
Correct.
And so, what does that look like in an organization like this? And just for people who are listening, before we even go there, you said Stewart Welding and Fabrication, but tell us a little bit about what are some of the things that are going on in this building right now that you guys do? Because there's 90,000 square feet of facility here, and that's just inside. Mm-hmm. There's a lot outside. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah. The short answer to that is anything metal we can build. So we don't build buildings, but we'll build everything inside of that. So if you can't buy it out of a catalog, we can build it for you. So we do we're very much a custom turnkey fabrication, but we also have an installation crew as well, about 25-ish people. And then they can install anything we build or install stuff for our customers like equipment and things like that. But carbon, stainless, aluminum, crazy stainless metals. We pretty much can build, anything from any type of metal.
So can you share with a couple of what you would call notable projects or things that you guys have done so people can understand what that means?
Yeah.
Because just to put that in a bite-sized chunk for people.
Yeah, sure. So big project we just completed, and we have a couple more to build. We build a stainless canopy going down to Arlington Cemetery.
Okay.
So where people come out of the metro, out of the subway station, there's these beautiful stainless canopy arches with glass on them that cover people from the rain. So we do things like that, like miscellaneous metals, but I would call that more kind of artistic.
Yeah.
To basic metals, to canopies and staircases and mezzanines, to lots of piping. So if you've put a Twizzler in your mouth in the last 20 years, it's gone through something we've built.
Wow.
So lots of food, pharma, beverage on that side. So, anything that helps, humanity and that side of things. And then lots of wastewater work as well. So working with GCs on wastewater upgrades or new wastewater plants.
Okay. Wow. So you made the transition, you come here. What is Brandon passionate about?
Happy people.
Okay. Tell me what that means.
Yeah. So I walked into, it was put so perfectly to me by a colleague to remind me what I walked into here. It was the perfect scenario for me, for what I needed in what I'm good at in the sense of a leadership style. Such an established group. We have employees. My COO has been here for going on 38 years, I believe. He was employee number 6. And if you think about that, like there's no better scenario for someone who doesn't know what they're doing to walk into a group who's so strong. Al knew how to really find good people and keep them here for a long time. We have a lot of 20, 25, 30-year people here.
Wow.
We actually track our employee retention monthly, and we put it on our newsletter. And so I walked into a scenario where it was very established. People knew exactly what they were doing, what they were supposed to be doing. And so that helped me really wrap my arms around where my place was in this whole thing. And when I say happy people, there was a lot of rules here.
Yeah.
And some that when I hired in, I was like, what? And it was just the way things were done. It wasn't good or bad. It was different from what I was used to and where I came from. So really it was talking to the employees, understanding what we like, what we don't like as a company, what we want moving forward, what needs to change, and trying to keep chipping away at those different things, whether that be vacation or time off or anything from tools to trucks to learning all of that stuff so we can wrap our arms and make this a place that has high retention. Because I think not wasting money on retention issues is a big thing for me.
Yeah.
I loved Amay's conversation about, the hiring, firing parameter.
Yeah.
I don't think I do a good enough job with that. And it really opened up my eyes after listening to that specific episode. So,
yeah.
But it's just, I think happy people are efficient people. And so if I'm an efficiency person, I love tiny gains. I love tiny percentages. I love tiny wins. And I think a lot of that not getting caught up with each other as interdependent people, and we all need each other to get this giant projects done.
Yeah.
So if we can not waste time on getting annoyed or being annoyed about really dumb stuff, I'd kind of really like to push that envelope.
That's actually really insightful. And I think it's a really huge part about building team. You talk about tiny wins. It really is about the little things. That's how you do the big things, especially if you're working with a team of people. A bunch of tiny wins with 150 people turned in some really big shit.
Yeah, it does.
It turned into some really big stuff. And it's like, I think that sometimes we get so caught up in the vastness of whatever the project or the task is that the task that we're trying to do, that we miss that it's like, just yesterday, a guy said to me, he goes, well, how do you eat a whale? And it's like one bite at a time.
I think scheduling gave that to me.
Yeah. Because
everything was one tiny line item with one tiny duration that when you put a lot of them together adds up to a giant project. When you look from the outside in, this $5 million project is terrifying.
Right.
But when you have 10,000 activities, it's not that scary.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and I mean, the importance of breaking those activities down, that also plays into your ability to see where you're at. I think that also in the trades and in what we do, whatever it is, this happens even in my personal life where I get so caught up in, I have to get this done, that I don't take the time to actually plan it out You know, I took a project management class years ago. Actually, I'd just gotten out of apprenticeship, and I was like, I want to learn more about project management. And I will never forget this. We'll call him a seasoned gentleman, was teaching the class. And he said over and over and over again, which is probably why this is the thing that I remember, 1 hour of planning saves 10 hours of doing.
Dang.
And he had the authority to speak to it. I mean, he was a project manager in a, mechanical, electrical, plumbing trade, which he had to deal with all of them. And that just really grabbed me. And I was like, 1 hour of planning. So 5 minutes of planning, doesn't mean that you need to plan for an hour. I've shared that with guys and they've planned for 5 hours and it's like, yeah, but the job was only 3. So, but when you have those vast projects and you break that stuff down, I think that we get so caught up in the vastness of what we have to do that we become overwhelmed and we just blindly run towards it and try to hit it.
Or give up.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. Especially in the world we're in with, these projects are just so massive that it can be quickly overwhelming. And if you don't when in doubt, zoom out, right? When you take a step back and look at even the progress that you've made, that's a big thing for me on the YouTube analytics. Like when I'm feeling self-doubt or I'm feeling like I'm not doing anything or not going anywhere, if I zoom that analytics graph out to lifetime versus 30 days, 90 days, I don't get so sad. I'm like, oh, I can see it slowly ticking up.
Exactly. I love that line. When in doubt, zoom out.
I think it's a stock thing.
That's awesome. So I like to break things up. And if you listen, you know what's coming. So what is a piece of gear or a tool that Brandon, cannot live without? What is something that you have to have?
So can I give you, because I think it was at Diamondback, it was such a philosophical answer and I loved it.
It was.
I want to give you one that's just something that I use every single day, and then I'd love to give you.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
So the one that I use every day is probably going to be headphones. As soon as I'm out of a people-focused something, my headphones are in when I do chores, when I'm running errands. I'm listening to something. I'm listening to something all the time. And then from a philosophical, this is probably from the new book we're reading, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book.
Interdependencies. I didn't understand the difference between dependent, independent, and interdependent. And hearing that, it's just a really fancy word for collaboration. And I'm notorious for inviting too many people to meetings.
Yeah.
My team will be like, do they really need to come? I really like the non-tangibles that people gain in meetings when they're not often in them.
Yeah.
So if you're in a meeting with, and this is going to sound bougie, I don't mean it this way, but some of the higher executives or management, seeing how we interact with each other, I think is a big non-tangible for people who don't always get to see that. So, or just learning not to talk over each other, when to not talk or talk, when, especially in teams, it's a little hard to get timing. And I think that's a skill that we expect everybody just to know. And so I like to pull people into those meetings, even if they don't. The only reason I say that is because I remember very vividly in my previous job, my president at that time invited me down to a very confrontational meeting in Texas. And he prepped it by telling me, you're going to go to this, you're going to sit in this room, you're not going to say anything, you're just going to sit there, and I want you to feel what this feels like.
Wow.
And so that really made me realize, this is a skill you need to learn. And how are you ever going to learn if no one's bringing you into these things? So, Elon Musk is famous for saying meetings are a waste of time, don't bring anybody, but I'm completely opposite of that. I think there's so many people skills you can learn in it, because a lot of people don't run meetings well, which I've also learned. And I'm not saying we're perfect, but I think there's a lot to learn about just general people dynamic inside of a meeting. Yeah.
I would actually agree with you. And now, some of my team would be like, yeah, but you invite too many people to meetings too. But I really love collaboration.
Me too.
Because I'm not that smart.
Same.
And when you get a bunch of people in the room, in what we do, there's a lot of smart people. And being able to, I can remember being in a meeting, and we love to problem solve. And the world is full of problems. Our competitive advantage is finding a problem and figuring out how to solve it.
Yep.
The only way that I've ever been successful at that is bringing other people into the room, getting our heads together and collaborating. None of our good ideas have been mine.
Yep.
And some of our good ideas haven't been any one person's, but this person says this person says this, and this person says this, and you bring them all together to make X. And so just recently, I was in a meeting yesterday, and we're talking about things, and everybody's like, well, what do you think? What do you think? And probably one of the biggest things that I've learned once I became the boss, or the chairman, or whatever that title means,
Sure.
Was that I needed to talk less.
Hard.
Because I can make a decision and move on something quickly, but when I do that, everybody's voice gets
Trampled. Yep.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that I realize at the end of the day, in certain situations, and you might be a project manager, a CEO, a president, a VP, whatever, a foreman. But when you get that collaboration, the ability to listen loudly, like for your team to know that you're listening, and then you get that collaboration. And then honestly, really what you should do is not speak, but ask questions that draw out more. Yeah. And the more questions that you can ask. And so I really believe in that collaboration. And obviously a meeting has to have purpose. You know,
Agreed.
Yeah, if it doesn't have purpose, I mean, you can spend a lot of time having meetings and not actually move the needle.
Agreed. Yeah, totally agree. I mean, purpose, I think, is very subjective as well to the person who's saying the purpose.
This is true.
Yeah. So what you're saying about is innovation, and my equation for innovation, when I say mine, I mean, I've learned tons of things from other people, and I've put this little thing together. Maybe it exists out there. I don't know. To me, I think innovation isn't a task you can go give someone. You can't be like, hey, Tommy, today I want you to innovate all day, 8 hours. I don't think they're going to be able to do that naturally.
Right.
So I think you need inclusivity. People need to feel like they can bring things up, even if they feel like it's a wild idea.
So how do you do that? How do you gain that inclusivity?
So
I interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
Yeah.
Inclusivity and diversity of thought. I think you need those two things, right? So you need people collaborating in a room, and you need everybody to feel like, you know what? I don't care how crazy this sounds. I'm going to throw it on the table because somebody else can bash it around and we'll make a diamond out of a piece of coal. So how does that happen? Not yelling at people. So I think it's just,
you know, you can yell without raising your voice, by the way.
oh, dang. It's a banger.
I mean, I know that because I've done that. And it's like, you can tell when you've done it because the whole room gets quiet. All that collaboration
really
disappears.
Really good.
That's one thing I think that comes with authority when you're in leadership. You have to be very, very careful with how you do that. Anyway, so not yelling.
No, yeah. And it's, you know, keeping all of those avenues open. And you're going to have to control the meeting a bit. So there may be some shutting of things down. Like if someone's really coming over the top of someone, like you have to protect everybody kind of from each other.
There it is.
And that's actually really hard to do.
It's very hard.
Especially if you're in like with another company and you really have to shut other company people down sometimes. I think that gets a little weird, but if you don't, the whole meeting's going to fail because people will, I think, react to that very quickly. So that inclusivity piece, and I know it's a little bit of a trigger word, but like that is one of the hardest things I think to do and make people actually feel real about.
Yeah.
And I think it fluctuates all the time just based on interactions all the time.
Well, I mean, I hate that some words have become trigger words. We talked a little bit about swearing and whatnot earlier. And it's like, I hate that certain words have become offensive only because we've made them offensive.
Agreed.
You know, and I personally believe that inclusivity is like, if you look up the definition of what it is, it's not all of the things that we've attached to it to make it. And it's actually really important in teamwork.
Agreed.
You know, if you don't, inclusivity, if I were to define it, I would call it that you're bringing people into a room, and this is going to be triggering as well, and the room becomes a safe space. You know, maybe you didn't hear that because the loud noise in the background. The room becomes a safe space. And when that happens, when people don't feel threatened, then they feel like they can share something that they might not be sure is right.
Yep.
Because if you feel threatened, you literally protect. And so you don't share thoughts. And whenever I'm in a meeting and someone is not sharing thoughts, two things happen. One, they're not bringing it all to the table. So we're not actually firing on all cylinders. We're not functioning the way that we want to. And two, it actually makes the rest of the team that is in that space feel threatened by them because they have a misunderstanding or a misrepresentation of that person's motive.
Yeah.
Because that person might be doing that because they don't feel safe, but the rest of the team feels threatened because they're like, well, why aren't you sharing that? Like, everyone knows when you hold something back or hide something. We talked a little bit about when we first met, I talked about honesty and my definition of what it is to be honest. And I believe that being honest doesn't mean that I tell you everything, but I don't hide anything. And so that's really important when you're in those meetings, that you're honest based on that definition, because listen, you don't have to like lay it all out there and reveal all of it. Matter of fact, nobody wants that.
Yeah, true.
But if you're hiding something, it changes the entire dynamic of the meeting. It actually removes inclusivity and diversity. Because the diversity is everybody sharing their thought.
Correct.
The inclusivity is everybody being safe. And then you leave the meeting with an actual solution.
Yeah, correct. You've changed my language around transparency quite a bit with that honest transparency conversation. That was deep and very insightful. And you're absolutely correct. No one wants to have it all, but the honest conversation is what everybody's yearning for. So I think that's brilliant.
Yeah. I'm sure it wasn't mine. Anytime that you say something's brilliant, it's,
From my standpoint, that was with you. So I'll give you the credit for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So know that you like headphones, which is really interesting that you said that. So I've watched some of your podcasts, and you have like a special, like, are you just like this guy that you want to do these little obnoxious, disruptive things that people notice? Like, if you're not watching right now, he's wearing a business button-down shirt that has subtle hints of Star Wars all over it. So, I mean, and on your podcast, I watched you, and you have these headphones that look like they're tie-dyed.
Yeah, they're red and black camo. I love the color red. So,
really?
Yes, that's where that comes from.
Interesting.
I'm not sure why. I don't know where color favoritism comes from, but yeah, I love red. And so with the weirdness,
that was not my word. I didn't say weirdness.
Well, I'm saying it because my hat says it. I think I have been a little bit that way. And part of it is, I guess a little bit of standing out, making people remember. I try to know my audience. I think in this scenario, you'll have lots of people in polos and things like that, and I thought about company logo stuff and I, was battling a bit with that this morning, but, I also wanted to represent kind of who I am and the weird kind of approach to things. Yeah. Just so it's memorable. It's a little bit more memorable because I think it benefits not only the company, but myself. And I want to make sure I always kind of bring that, sometimes probably too far. I probably should guide into the norm of things a little bit more often, but I struggle with that.
It's interesting that you say it that way. It's something that I think I've been dealing with, and what you're talking about is continuing to be able to grow. Because we everything's always changing. Like when I started in the trade, the service vans that we worked out of had a CB radio in them, and the office had a bass, and they could blow the horn in the truck so that we knew that they were trying to get a hold of us. So, little revealing, I was only like 3 when I was in those vans. So, but the point of what I'm saying is we always, things are always changing. And if we aren't continuing to learn and adapt and to grow, and that's a good thing. Like we were talking earlier about how just technology, AI, those sorts of things, like there's a balance between, I don't want to say being afraid of it, but there's a balance between being cautious and refusing to acknowledge that something exists that actually will make your life better. Yeah. And so I believe that it's really important that we're continuing to grow and to learn in that way. And for me, you talk about company branded stuff. And when I started my first company, I wanted everything branded, and I wanted everybody wearing company shirts because when someone walked on the job site, I wanted to look like we were there in force. And so it was like, and if you have 2 trucks that are the same color and lettered the same, it looks like you have 10. If you have 4 guys on a job that are wearing shirts it looks like there's 15 there. Like,
Interesting.
I mean, and I have a friend who always says, ask me how I know. Ask me how I know. I mean, it's a thing. But all of that to say, as we've grown as a company, now we've come to a place where it's like, I've also realized what can happen when you do that. Well, that's a good strategy move. I don't want to crush individuality because we're all different people. Like, you know, my thumbprint that I use to open my Apple computer is different than yours.
Yep.
And that means that we're all different. And so it's like, I'm really actually, and I'm actually being honest and a little transparent here about something that I'm currently struggling with, where it's like, well, how much of that do we maintain and how much of that do we allow some individuality? Because when you allow that individuality, it comes back to that collaboration, that ability to have people bring things in. What I've learned is what I might think is the best is not always the best.
What do you think you're going to lose if you allow it?
Well, I think, being really honest, I'll talk to you about it this way. Oh, wow. This is my podcast. Back off.
Sorry.
This is the way that I would put it to you is one of the things is, we'll call them hard hat stickers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's some pretty inappropriate hard hat stickers out there. Mm-hmm. Now, I laugh pretty hard at some of them, but I would never want our team putting that on their hard hat. Because that's not who we are as a company. Sure. And that communicates something, you know, like if we use certain language, we shut down certain conversations that we don't want to shut down.
Yeah.
And so there's a balance between, you know, the reputation of an organization as a team and honoring that, but not crushing individuality. And so it's like, you know, right now, our sister company, their policy is that, well, you know, you don't put any stickers on your hard hat unless it's a safety sticker or it's been approved or whatever. But I literally have been kind of wrestling back and forth with, is that because everybody is so different and trying to figure out, well, what is the structure that I put in place that allows individuality, but also maintains a reputation?
Yeah. And those of you who don't know, hard hat stickers in the trades is like currency.
This is true.
I mean, Maxim Crane were the hottest ones when I was down in southern Georgia or the middle of Georgia.
They were like cigarettes in Vietnam, hard hat stickers in construction.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the more you have on, the more veteran you are and how many places you've been and things like that. So, no, I get it. I think is the line offensive or not, you know? But you have to define what offensive obviously means because it's different for everybody. But, you know, I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm with you there.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't know, but anybody in our organization that listens is now going to know. So it's out there.
Welcome.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, maybe they'll help you find a solution.
Well, all right. Stop it. My gosh. Goodness gracious.
Sorry.
It's like he has his own podcast, and so he's just taken over. Jeez. So you talk about team building. You talk about what you're doing here in this vast building. Let's talk a little bit about leadership.
Okay.
What, you know, you came from an organization where, how many years of experience did you have with where you came from?
Managing or doing?
Oh, just all of it.
10.
So 10 years in an industry, and then you come into another industry, and you roll right into a level of leadership. Mm-hmm. So talk with me about what makes a good leader.
Cool.
I'm not saying that you are one. I'm just saying talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I didn't make that. I mean, I made that face because I'm not sure. I'm not sure what that. I think that answer's. Ooh, I just hissed. I think that answer's different for a lot of different situations. To me, big one that comes right off the top of my head would be humility. It's the first thing I walked in with.
Yeah.
Because I've said this lots of times before on other things or with other people, and the most mechanically deficient person in this building or the other building or in the field. So I have so much respect for what we do here because it's so foreign to me, you know, down to being able to use a tape measure. When I do things with my father, I'm like, hey, 3 checks past the halfway mark. Like that tells you how good I am with measuring.
There are a lot of tradespeople that just went, okay.
Turn off. All right. Podcast off. But I think the humility piece is like, I would never be able to do what we're doing here. And I never led because I think you said this on previous episodes. You all can sniff that out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So I never wanted to be in that vein. I just wanted to figure out how I could help as quickly as possible. And then also I knew a lot of my PM stuff would help here. A lot of my project management experience. So I really tried to attack those pockets that I could help as quickly as possible. And attack's not the right word, but I just mean take care of or refine.
Yeah.
And then the rest I kind of figured out because I was only managing 20 people prior to this, and they didn't even work in the same state as me up to that point. So I got very comfortable with remote management very quickly, which, hey, 2020, welcome.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful at that point in time. I didn't know that was what was happening. But then when I came over, it's like, okay, here's 130, employees and have fun, figure it out. And then also trying to navigate an owner, who Al was going through what he was going through with trust and things like that. And that was a big challenge for me to understand and be empathetic with that. I don't know. I just tried to do the best I could every day and screwed up a lot, and then just tried to stay focused on how to make life here the best it could be.
Yeah.
I think that was really the mission at the beginning.
So I think that you gave the best answer that you possibly could give for what I would call the number one thing that you need to be a leader, and that is humility. That is the number one thing. I'm going to get a little dangerous here because I'm going to ask you a question about someone on your team. Okay. And you can pass or you can not pass. But you said you came in here and your COO was here for 38 years.
At that time, 32, 33?
Okay, 32. Yeah. Anything over 25 is impressive. Anything over 10 is impressive. Yeah. Who am I kidding? Is that something that he had in leadership?
Yeah, so I would say the team, not only including the management team, but the team established here really kept the ship, rolling for whatever time period that needed to be. The most impressive thing that I was really, and we're talking about Brian specifically, I look back on that time and not realize like what I could have walked into, and I think that's why when my colleague told me like be very understanding of what helped you to this point, and Brian was a huge piece of. He could have been a complete asshole, right? Yeah. And could have been like, why not me? And none of that ever. And whether he felt that way or not, I'm not sure, but it never, ever came across.
He absolutely exuded humility then.
Oh my gosh. Like I could ask the stupidest, because I didn't know anything about industrial construction. I knew power plant construction. So the word usage and all of the things, the intricacies of what we do here, I had to learn all that language. So,
isn't it funny when you walk onto a job site, we literally all speak different languages, electricians, drywallers, industrial, it's like you could say I'm in construction for 20 years and right away someone will know what type of construction you're in.
Yes.
What's
weird though? Project management is a universal language.
It is because project managers don't know how to do any one thing. We're all just managing everybody else. So we learn what they say so we can sound cool in whatever area we drop into.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, well, when you talk about with Brian, I think this is really important. And Brian, watch your comments or dislikes if you're messing with the metrics when you watch the podcast. But I think that's a huge thing for leaders, as with 38 years of experience, to keep humility is huge, because we tend to begin to think that we know because we've done. And I think that's something that's really dangerous for leaders who have the knowledge. And honestly, you probably created the perfect storm when you came in here, because you had humility, he had humility. And when you put those two things together, so he had humility with all of his knowledge, and he could have had an attitude, he could have been angry, and maybe he was and he dealt with it, which, man, would that be a podcast? I mean, seriously. Because
I'm going to have him on mine, so get ready.
Well, not if I ask him first.
How dare you?
But I mean, seriously, that combined with then your humility of coming in here, because that is the essence of what you're talking about with teamwork. And I would say what you guys did was you saved a business. You took a business that was experiencing something, because, listen, we're all finite in our lives. What is the old phrase that the old timers used to say? There's two things in life that are for sure: taxes and death. Yeah. So it's like you came into a business that was experiencing that from a founder, which the stories of founders that have died or passed or left a business and it not being successful after they left is exorbitant.
I think it's like 40%.
It's
think it's
crazy.
Gen 2.
Of course you have the statistics. Of course you do. Yeah. But it's like, and you guys were able to navigate through that. And it's because the humility that Brian had and the humility that you had. And then when you combine that together, the power and whatnot comes out of that.
Yeah, I mean, and it even, I want to be fair to the whole team. It just blossomed beyond that. Everybody was very open in the sense of like, we're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But let's ride this roller coaster and see what does happen. And then once you get past that first 6 months and you're out of that, like, okay, we're not sure where, once we all kind of got on the same language and the same tracks, like it got easier and easier the farther down the road we got. But they were very accommodating and just open, just because we knew we had to do something right. And it was a very togetherness to figure it out because this thing's so important.
I think that's a real testament to your founder, your father-in-law, Al, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's a real testament to Al and the legacy that he left.
Agreed.
Meaning, foundations are really funny to me. And when I say funny, I mean intriguing. We're sitting on a concrete floor right now that is the foundation of this room, which has a certain depth and a certain structure, a certain amount of rebar and all that to handle the weight of whatever comes on it. Mm-hmm. And Al built a foundation for this team to build on that you could literally go to the next level, and this is where it really culminates and it becomes real. Al built a foundation that affected the lives of how many people work here today?
155.
155 people. Now, I love math and this with like multiplication. So 155 people that I assume some of them have families, which then multiply out and multiply out and multiply out. Some of them have children that are probably going to go to college, probably going to go to trade school, probably going to start their own businesses, probably going to do this, probably going to do that, all because of a foundation that Al started. Mm-hmm. And he built since 1984, which let's also just take that into consideration. That's a lot to build. I don't know, Al, but people do not hang around people for that number of years unless there's something there that is good and strong and real. And I mean, honestly, that's the kind of people that I want to know. Those are the kind of people that I want to work with.
Agreed.
And whether you are that or not that, that's who you should want to be. Because then we build these foundations, and it doesn't matter if you are an excavator, if you are a carpenter, if you are a drywaller, if you are I don't even know what you are, a spreadsheet guy that comes from the power industry. But it's like, it doesn't matter if we build those foundations that we can then continue to build on. And then we build teams within those organizations. We have the ability to truly affect change. And it's something that if we do those things, the greatest, I heard this once said by a guy, I don't want to say it's mine, but I'm going to steal it and use it. The greatest lie ever told is that it's not that simple.
Ooh.
It's like,
come on.
I mean, seriously, that is the greatest lie that was ever told, because it really is that simple. It is not complicated. It's just freaking hard.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reality of it. It is, listen, if you want to be buff and you want to be ripped, it's not that hard. I mean, it is hard, but it's like, it's really simple how you get there. If you do those things, it will happen, and I think what the culture and society has done is anytime that something gets all these things on, and like you said, and you understand this more than most, because when you break down a schedule, when you break down, a project with 10,000 man hours, which that's a lot of man hours. When you, and I'm sorry, people hours. I don't know how I'm supposed to say that. Yeah. But my Grammarly actually corrected me the other day. I was typing up an email and I said manpower is short on this job or whatever it was. And it said, you can't say manpower. So I say people power now.
Keeping you in line.
Yes. So, but when we do that, what we can do is exponential.
Yeah. And I think about it quite often about, I would never be able to do what he did.
Right.
in the sense of I'm not an entrepreneur. I can't build something from nothing. I never will be able to. I just don't have that risk factor. I don't have all of the things that he had that he was so good at, obviously. I'm a tinker. I'm a tiny wind. I'm an efficiency. I'm like, that's where my place is in the world. And, I look back on that and what he gave up, which his life, I'm not the doctor. I don't know what happened, but I'm sure the stress of a lot of those years played into some of that. And, I wasn't around for a lot of it, but, I talked to my wife and know about the nights staying at the shop and things like that, and being here to be accountable for the team, like all that did happen. Yeah. And so you're right. That hard work, that is a major part of what this takes.
Yeah. Well, and I would go as far as to say, and I am a founder, so I can say this. Al couldn't take it where you're taking it. Because founders are different. And we must realize when a business comes to a certain point and a team comes to a certain point, we don't not have purpose in it, but we must bring in, you call yourself a tinkerer. I would use the word maintainer. Maintenance as a founder, I hate maintenance. I hate it. But there's a person on our team that he is a maintainer. 100% changes our business. We would not be able to go to the next level without it. And I don't have it. I have a risk muscle. I have a desire to start things. But I think that's really important for us to acknowledge and recognize. And I think it segues really well. And I hope you're all right. We're going a little longer here, but this is good stuff. So I think that segues into the next thing that I want to talk about with you, because I think that you have some authority to speak to this. But the ability to recognize as a founder, okay, if I want to go to the next level, I need people on my team that have different skills than I do and look at things differently than I do. I just recently was in a conversation with a COO of all things. And he's like, he was so struggling with, well, I don't know how to do what they do, so I don't know how I can lead them. And it's this thing, and he became, a chief of operations because of his ability to draw teams together. His ability, like he is the essence of what I believe a leader is, in the sense of people want to follow him. Like he doesn't ask them to; they want to follow him. Right. And so, but he doesn't. As the organization grows, he's managing people that I have no idea how to do that. And we would not be able to do a podcast if it was just you and me. I mean, seriously, it would be really bad. There are guys here that are making this look really awesome behind the scenes, and I have no idea how to do what they do. But my question for you is, because I believe that you came into an organization based on your own words, that you had no idea how to do this.
Correct.
What do you say to that chief of operations that, or whoever it is that's coming into a leadership role, which has just kind of happened naturally because of who they are? What do you say to them about when they don't know how to do it? Well, why are they in leadership? Because honestly, I would argue that they're even the better person to be in leadership because they don't have that.
Yeah. Oh, man. This brings back a lot of memories. So I did have this conversation with my previous president, the one who took me to the really tough meeting. And I said the same words. I said, how can I possibly lead people when I don't know what they do day to day? And he just laughed at me. I was like, why are you laughing at me? And then I fast forward to today and I get it, right? It's the collaboration piece. It's the trust that you put in people. It's having, I get scared of subjective leadership in the sense of I don't have data to prove what I'm feeling, or I need to slow my roll and calm down. There would be lots of times where I get wrapped up around something. I go pull data and I'm like, all right, relax. Everything's fine. I think if you don't have that, you can get down a very scary road very quickly.
That is good right there.
So if you don't have that, I would be a little worried about how you're going to handle things you don't understand, right? But if you have metrics and you have, so data with insight is the perfect combination. If you just have data and a bunch of numbers, it doesn't do anything for you. You got to have the insight.
Data with insight. What is the insight?
So data is just numbers on a page, right? A spreadsheet. But if you put them in a pivot table or you put them in a graph, there's your insight in the data, so you can actually read it to make a decision. So you need both, because if you just have numbers, you're going to look at a giant spreadsheet and go, this is dumb.
Yeah.
So if you have both, then you can make non-subjective decisions about your team or sections of your team. Now, finding the blind spots in your company and making sure that you have a metric to say, and really, if you're asking yourself, how do I do that? Just go to that section of your company and say, from an outsider looking in, how do I know they're performing well? Good or not good is the phrase I love to use. So are projects performing good or not good? That's the question we answer every Tuesday in the afternoon on our cost meetings. And so if you just start with that, once you get that first couple pieces of data or insight and those graphs or whatever that looks like, it'll evolve into the next question, right? And you'll just keep adding charts onto that. So I would say, like, really get comfortable in the data and insight space. If you don't know how to do that, hire someone. I think they'll be worth their weight in gold very quickly. So I would start with that, because if you don't understand what it takes to do their job, you should understand what the result should look like and measure against that. Because everybody needs some sort of measuring tool to make sure they're doing a good job or not.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Well, I think it's really important, just what your president said or did, laughing, because on the side of leadership where you don't know what they're doing, that is something that makes it that you can look at things that you wouldn't normally look at, which makes you better. And I would go all the way back to what you said about happy people. I think the only way to lead when you're looking to have happy people in a team is to care about them. And to care about them, I was literally on a project a few weeks ago, and it was late at night, and it was not normal work hours, and I was driving from somewhere and passing this project, and I thought, well, I'm going to stop in and I want to look at some things and see some things. And I walked in the door, and there was a crew of people working that were there, and the construction foreman was there with them, and it was almost 9 o'clock at night, and they weren't supposed to be there. A problem had arisen, and that foreman could have just said, hey guys, you do this. But he was there into the evening. He had a wife and he had kids, and he made a sacrifice to be with them for that team. And they were all happy. And I think that's because they believed that he genuinely cared. I think he had also just bought them like dinner. So that helped too. But he had genuinely cared about them. And it was like, he's like, I'm not leaving until we're done. And he could have.
Sure.
Like, when you have the power to step away and let other people do the work, and you were there, I don't even think it matters if you're doing the work, but if you're present, that's huge. That's huge.
Do you live in the first in, last out mindset? I don't.
So
that's the reason I'm asking.
No, I would love to say that I do. There's a movie with Mel Gibson called We Were Soldiers, and he's like, I'm the first boots on the ground, and I'm the last boots to leave. Can we edit that out? I made that noise. Like, that was weird.
Get you a thumbs up.
Yeah. That means we don't edit anything. You know that.
Yeah.
But like, that sounds really cool. And there are times where it's right. But in leadership, one of the things, I had a great mentor that shared with me. I used to come into the office at like 5 o'clock in the morning. And I would be in the office before anybody was there, and I felt like that was my job. I felt like that's what I was supposed to do. And then I would not allow myself to leave. I can remember texting my wife being like, I can't leave yet. There's still people here, which was not really healthy for my family.
Right.
But the thing that the mentor shared with me after he confronted me on being dangerous and in my workaholic mode, he said to me, he goes, Josh, you need to not go into the office till 8 a.m. And I was like, no, you do not understand how this works. If I do that, everyone will lose respect for me. No one will want to do this. Dang. And he's like, oh, so you're operating out of a place of fear. Well, that's a great place to operate from. And he was really not nice about it. Most of my mentors are mean. If you're listening and you've mentored me, you're a jerk.
Apparently that's what you needed.
Shut up. I was literally going to say that, and you took it from me.
Sorry.
But no, it is what I needed, because I'm too dense to get it if you're not in my face about it.
Sure.
But he said to me, he goes, so you're leading from a place of fear. He goes, listen, here it is, Josh. If you have to be there all the time, you're communicating to them that you don't trust them. And he goes, and they for sure will never grow, because if you're there, they will ask you, what do I do about this? How do I do this? And he goes, you need to show up after they've been there and working for a while, because that's the only way that they're going to learn to work in the roles that they need to learn to work into.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It took me a couple of years to decide to do what he told me to do. But when I did it, that's when people started to rise up in an organization and actually become project managers and actually become vice presidents and actually become presidents. And then the organization began to grow in a way that then I had to grow, which is what it's all about for all of us. Because I've said this before and I will say it again. If you're not growing, if you're not learning, then you might as well dig a hole and get in it, because there's no point. And the more, when you begin to not grow, you start to go in the opposite direction. And then you lose something that is really, really important for life. This isn't even for work. This is just life. You lose this thing called being self-aware. And when you lose that, you lose everything. Because if you are not self-aware, that means that you have no idea what's going on. So, all of that to say, I'm not a first boots in and a last boots out. There are times for that.
Sure.
You know, and even still, there are times where it's like, I want to make sure I'm the first person on the job, because I want them to know, even in my role, I'm willing to sacrifice because they're sacrificing.
Yep.
But then there's a time to be like, hey, I trust you. You've got this. You know, because if you're always there, one, they're never going to learn. And two, they're going to feel like you are managing everything that they're doing. And you do not build people by telling them how to eat food.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that answer. I don't think I've ever heard, and I'm always interested in what people, because I don't live in that headspace of first in, first out, but I'm always interested because I don't know if I'm right or wrong. You know, we're all trying to sort out what good looks like for individual situations. I've never thought of it that way. So thank you. It was very helpful.
Cool. Well, you might have thought that you were getting out of this part of the podcast because we've been going so long here. But if I were listening to this podcast, and I usually do more than once, my favorite part is hearing about other people's mistakes.
Yeah, sure.
And I always am talking to people, and I always ask the question, you know, what is a mistake that you've made that you've learned from? And the reason is I think that if people aren't comfortable with talking about their mistakes, don't want to say this, but I'm going to. If you're not comfortable with talking about your mistakes, you're beginning on that opposite direction of being self-aware. Listen, I hate talking about my mistakes. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But if I don't look at them, I become callous to them, and then I don't see them, and then I don't see the next one, and I don't see the next one, and then I'm not self-aware. I don't know what's going on, and we're gone. So, and I think that this is a very important part about the line and the podcast is for those that are listening, to learn from a mistake that you've made. That the reason that I hate mistakes is they usually cost me. They either cost me in reputation or they cost me financially, whatever it might be. But if we can share mistakes that we've made, then other people might be able to learn and it not cost them so much. So, Brandon, what is a mistake that you have made that you've learned from that you're willing to share with us?
Before I give that story, I want to prove to you that I listened to most of these episodes. So early on, you used to ask this question and people would either dodge it or not understand the question.
That's true.
And then of recently, I think probably 2 episodes ago, you changed the way you asked this question, I think, to make sure people understand and to actually answer it. Because you have let some people get away with not answering it. And I was very annoyed at you for those episodes. But yeah, so for me, I think one that rings pretty true here was probably only a couple of years ago. I was trying to implement, I read The Great Game of Business. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but essentially it's a really elaborate manufacturing like incentive program. And I wanted to implement it here. I get very excited. I read the book. I came up with like what we were going to do. And I'm notorious for running before I walk. And that is a huge problem for me. And this was a perfect storm of that. I got very excited. I started running. I thought I talked to all the right people. I thought I had everything in place, and it failed miserably.
Wow.
So I had to step back and turn it into just like a bonus program for the last couple of years until I figure out what good looks like there, because my equation just wasn't working or whatever. So it all turned out okay, but I had to go to everyone who I told this is what we're doing to then tell them this is not what we're doing. and I'm an idiot, and I will try to figure this out for the best path forward. But that was probably the most recent one that really probably had me pretty dour for a month, maybe a month and a half, feeling sorry for myself.
Wow.
Because I was just like, and it was mostly, like you said, it's the pride thing of like, I'm supposed to have all the answers. Why didn't I have this answer?
Yeah.
But really, what was so great about it is when I talked to the team, they're like, "No, you're good. We'll figure it out in the future." And I was like, even my wife was like, "When are you gonna get? You got to get over this." And I was like, "Yeah, I got to get over this." And then, you know, talking to my leadership team, talking to the people here, and realizing like I was making it a way bigger deal than I needed to, that it was to some other people. You know, you slowly climb out of that, but I don't. If you are never feeling that way, you're probably not trying crazy shit.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And it wasn't that crazy. I should have been able to figure it out. I just didn't, and I felt really dumb.
That's actually really good. I think you touch on something there, which goes back to one of the number one qualities of leadership, of a leader, which is humility. Humility can be dangerous, where we have this thing that we call false humility. And I'm very guilty of this. I'll just share with you one of my mistakes is that I've been in the, all right. So actually,
let's get real.
I have to do it. So when we were growing as a company, my title is chairman.
Yeah.
I hate it.
It's very prestigious.
Yeah, that's why I hate it. I met with, I went to an executive like leadership meeting once a month with other business people, and I'll never forget this. And I said, my team is saying I need to change my title to this. And I was like, it's really pretentious. It's really out there. I was like, and we're not big enough to have a chairman. Like, what is that? We don't have 150 employees, or 155. I'm sorry. But I'm there and I'm struggling with it. And I'm like, I don't, and I really don't like titles. And we talked about that earlier. I think titles are more for the outside than they are for the inside. Sure. But I was there and I was talking about all these reasons why I didn't like this. And finally, one of the guys in the group literally looks at me and he goes, "Would you stop being so prideful and arrogant?" And I'm like, "What?" And he goes, "Dude, this is false humility, man. Woo! You're acting all, like you have humility about this, because you're already doing it. So just own it." And we get, and you talk about when we make a mistake and that internalization of how we feel, like how you struggled for a month. And I get that. I'm there. But the quicker we realize that that's false humility and we get out of it, the more we help our teams.
Yeah.
And like you said, if you're not struggling with it to some extent, well, then you're probably full on prideful, which means that you're not self-aware and you don't see anything. But the key is when your team says to you, "Hey, we're okay, we're good," and they see that humility, well, then you need to see what they see.
Yeah.
And you need to accept it, and you need to move on.
Yeah, to move on. Yeah. No, two things there for me. One, props to you and your team for having an environment where someone can be that honest with you, because that is not normal. I've come to realize that is a hard point to reach in culture. So that's massive for someone to look at the founder or the chairman and say, "Slow your roll.
Yeah.
You're fine."
Yeah.
The other one, maybe it was just a preemptive strike because you are a chairman.
Wow. Wow. You are never
I was
coming
looking.
back.
I was looking to the audience for some laughs. I got one.
Rykern.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah. I totally. It sucks, but like you said, you realize what is around you and what they're giving back to you, and then move on.
Yeah. Well, Brandon, we've been talking here for a while. I feel like it's been 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. Same.
And I actually would love to do this again sometime. This was great. And I think we talked about some really good things. I love the ambiance of where we're talking. Yeah, I used ambiance in a
and
fab
you said
shop.
it the right way.
Yeah. And so I love that. I love what we talked about. I think that you brought some real knowledge here, and I appreciate that. I would just I would ask you. You have some. You have your own podcast. You have some different things. Where can people find you that they can actually listen to what you're talking about, just like we're talking here? Because I've listened. I keep looking over there, like my camera's over there, but it's right here. I've listened to your podcast. I just listened to one with Dan Sod of Sod Metal out of Colombia, and great story. Like I feel like I got to know him, and I never would have gotten that had I not listened to your podcast. So where can people find this?
Yeah. So, personal stuff. I'll start with that. So it's Just Some BS podcast, Just Some BS, but Brandon Stanchock as well. It's a little play on words there. It's new. I'm only on my 9th or 10th episode. So I'm very novice to the whole situation.
It's very good.
Well, thank you. I realized my mission statement through you guys figuring out what that needed to look like. It actually came to me last night, and
That's
it was
awesome.
proving that you can learn something from everyone, because I don't really have a genre or a scope. It's really everybody's interesting story, and I think that's really important for everybody to break some ignorances you may have about a specific subject or something. So that's kind of what my mission statement is. I'm not good at social situations or going to large functions. I'm not very good. I'm the one sitting in the corner on my phone.
Never would have guessed it.
And so this is my way of putting myself out there with still being in a comfortable space that I can control. So that's really kind of one of the reasons I started. And I love learning different things about crazy things. I think it's so fascinating. So that's that. And then really from a work perspective, SWF Industrial, we do have a YouTube page that we try to capture some of the things that are going on here. And our website, I think it's fantastic. We have lots of pictures of what we do here. Our LinkedIn is pretty popular as well, from SWF's industrial side of things. So yeah, we just do amazing shit here. Our people are really awesome. If you look at our pictures on the website, they're incredible. We had a professional photographer come in, and I was like, just make these people look as badass as possible. And they did such a good job.
That's awesome.
Because what we're doing is we're literally building the world like the rest of the really amazing companies you've had on. So I love it. I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you for stepping up to the line.
Thank you.
And you have your throw out here. We're going to close. So we're done. We're out.
LFG. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
I don't know when we're officially done. That was awesome, guys. Thank you.
You're waiting for it?
I hope most people know what that means.